Welcome to Effective Cannabis Conversations, the show where knowledge meets curiosity and stigma takes a back seat, where we uncover the transformative potential of cannabis in health. Before we dive in, just a quick reminder, the information we're sharing today is for health awareness only. It is not medical advice or a substitute for consulting your doctor. It is here to help you learn, ask the right questions, and make informed decisions about your health and your care. Today's Effective Cannabis Conversation is one that far too many families will recognize immediately. For many caregivers, the hardest part is not just watching a loved one struggle. It is trying to advocate for them in a system that often feels rushed, fragmented, reactive, and disconnected from the patient's everyday reality. Families are left managing medications, appointments, symptoms, behaviors, emotional exhaustion, and impossible decisions. Yet their voices are too often treated as secondary instead of essential. We're also going to talk about what happens when routines and therapies that have been helping patients are suddenly interrupted, when individualized care is replaced with standard protocols, when the only answers families hear is take them back to the ER. This is not just an Alzheimer's conversation. This is a conversation for caregivers, patients, advocates, and anyone who has ever felt abandoned, overwhelmed, or invisible while trying to navigate today's medical system. Because behind every chart, diagnosis, and treatment plan is a human being who deserves dignity, quality of life, and to truly be seen. Who is really advocating for the patient when the patient can no longer advocate for themselves? Today, joining me is Heidi Whitman, a global leader, founder of Empower Her Group, cannabis advocate, and caregiver for her mom living with Alzheimer's disease. Heidi, thank you for being here. Could you please kick us off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your role as a caregiver for your mom?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me, Debbie. It's an honor because I have admired you for so long as part of the Empower Cannabis Society. You're a member that has not only the drive, but the stamina as a patient to continue to advocate for the rest of us in the world, that just showcase and share. And it means so much to me. So thank you so very much. As Debbie said, I'm Heidi Whitman. I live here in the UK and I've been here for 13 years. I work in the global cannabis space as a strategist, an advisor, a board member, and I was a founder. I currently have is caring for my mother. She has Alzheimer's disease as well, advanced Alzheimer's and vascular dementia. This was what seemed like a sudden onset, but as she was living in America and I was here, I wasn't aware of the symptoms that were presenting after COVID, after the isolation, and after her not having the stimuli that she was normally surrounded by. And I think when any type of a neurological disease is not seen by others, it doesn't get treated. So when I received my mother, which brought her over to the UK, I've been caring for her full time ever since and watching the decline. So my role in cannabis has been able to give her a chance to utilize medical cannabis that has staved off a lot of the decline that was once considered extremely rapid to become a little bit slower. But more recently, the decline was more prevalent, and that was due to a hospitalization, which we can go over on the lack of care that she received only after 4 days. And that was 4 months ago. We're now in May, and I'm still battling the damage that was done in those 4 days. And that's where the medical system has failed. So I'm very keen to discuss and dive into it, unpack it a bit, and give advice to others that might be in a similar role, managing a household, managing work, and then managing a very sick and dying parent.
Thank you very much, Heidi, for being here and being willing to have this conversation. And it's so important that we do share what you know so that maybe someone else that's in the same struggle could understand and maybe have the feeling that there's somebody out there that they could reach out to, because we feel so lonely when we're in this space as a caregiver, as I was a caregiver for my mom and my mother-in-law for a period of time. So it's not easy. So thank you for being willing to open up and talk about this today with us. So you talked a
Absolutely.
little bit just right off the bat that when your mom entered into the hospital, what were your biggest concerns about her care and routine and being disrupted?
Well, I must say that my mother, despite having these neurological diseases, she is an extremely physically healthy person. The motive to call the ambulance service. Now, mind you, in the UK, we have National Health Services. That means it is a socialized medical system, which also means there's very little preventative care. It's a reactive medicinal organization run by the government. And what I was told over the years was if you go to the hospital, sometimes you don't come out. If you go to the hospital, you're going to be sitting for 13 hours. If you go to the hospital, there's probably no bed and she'll be in a hallway. And when the ambulance came, saw her distended stomach, realizing that there was something wrong, they obviously suggested we go straight away to a hospital called Worthing Hospital, which I've been also told is the worst one to go to. But did I have a choice? No. So I went to the hospital at 1 p.m. on a Saturday. My mother was seen 13 hours later with pain going on, with incredible confusion. We have taken her out of what has become familiar and placed her in a very crowded, very filthy equivalent of an emergency room here, which is called accident and emergency, at the ambulance dump off station, right where the ambulances were coming. Anything that came by ambulance that was deemed more important than her symptoms was taken care right away because that's how they have to work. The doctors are limited to how many patients they can see an hour. The waiting room was full. And my advocacy there was at first calm, thinking things are going to go a little bit smoothly. I have an extremely vulnerable person, 83 years old, not doing well, in pain, confused, and all we got was the equivalent of Tylenol in an IV bag, which she quickly ripped out of her arm because, again, this was not an environment where she could be contained, restrained, no matter how much I hovered over her. It was scary for her. And then it was only about midnight where I'm like, when are we getting the CT scan? When are we going to have a scan of her body? And sure enough, once they did it, they said, oh, she has diverticulitis and a slight perforation. Okay, so now what? We're gonna keep her. Okay, fine. I trusted that they were gonna keep her. So my concern was leaving her because she has not really been without me or my carers that I've had privately employed to manage anything that I can't do, meaning when I'm traveling for work, etc. Everything routine is the same. Everything is the same. She eats a plant-based diet. She eats foods that I thought were good. Little did I know I gave her too many nuts, which is what caused this. Seeds and nuts are not great for this particular condition because she's never been sick. So all my healthy granola and all this stuff just backfired. But meanwhile, I wrote down her medication. They confirmed who she was. I did everything that I felt was safe enough to leave to in the morning. And what I later found out was they had her down as a man. They had her gender wrong because her name is Leslie, and that's a male name as well. They had her gender wrong on her chart when my staff went in the next day to check on her so I could rest, so that I could work, so I couldn't miss work. They went to check on her. She was what looked like she was sedated, but I think she was just exhausted from the night before. They confirmed by calling me, the nurse on staff, that she was going to get her medicine that she's normally on. And 2 days later, when I went to get her, because the following day I also was on the phone versus physically there. I didn't want to agitate her thinking I was doing the right thing. I found out she was not given any of her regular neurological medication whatsoever, and they hadn't bathed her because she didn't want to. Now, if you're a skilled nurse, you would know that Alzheimer's patients tend to go against hygiene at a certain point. They go against putting on their socks, eating, drinking, whatever it is. You get creative and you figure it out. I've had to learn on the job. And these are trained nurses that did not know how to handle that. So my mother sat unbathed, unmedicated, and I stormed in suit at 7:30 in the morning. And I walked in, I said, "Who's in charge?" And I felt the surgeons walking behind me as I powered through the hospital. I said, "I need my mother out now. Because if we're not doing surgery, she doesn't need to be here," which was the result of a conversation I'd had. Um, the neglect was so apparent that even the staff were like, "Well, if you wanna make a complaint, here's the number, here's the number, here's" you're admitting the failure of the system here, and they have no choice because we're underfunded. So my mother's disruption, her lack of medication, of course, there's 0 medical cannabis gonna be offered to a woman in that state. I actually was hesitant because it was an oil and we're dealing with gut. I didn't want to agitate it. There was a lot of things I was trying to mitigate. And I ended up taking her out of there. No one followed up afterwards. We're still battling through a steep decline in executive and cognitive function because of this happening. We're still probably battling an infection because they're hesitant to give me more antibiotics, even though I demanded them today and got some more of what worked initially, which was metronidazole. And we used to use it in the veterinary world, which was my background too. I'm like, this definitely clears things up. So I could use that right now. It's not a pleasant thing to have to clean up. And needless to say, my concerns and what was told to me were valid. She did not get the care she needed. Now, in different countries, it's different. If I had private insurance, might have been a different example, but I can't afford that. So I have her on the national service. And it was disheartening and disruptive. And now I have a sicker mom than I had 4 months ago simply because of the trauma of whatever she went through while I wasn't there and my care team wasn't there. It was through the actual healthcare system dropping the ball in so many ways.
You left me a lot there to unpack.
Yeah, no,
Well,
that's okay. We can go through the wait times, the lack of medication being provided, saying they didn't know they had her gender wrong. They had her gender wrong on the file. Those are mistakes that cannot happen. And this isn't the first time I've heard this about the UK systems. This isn't. I've had people with the wrong name tag on going off to surgery. God forbid they had a surgery that wasn't for them. Those types of errors can't happen in our healthcare system. That just shows where we are lacking big time. And we could do better.
we can definitely do better, and I'm in the US, and we still see these issues in the US as well, even with as much money as we pay into the medical system. We can still find patients that are not registered properly. I had an incident myself when I was in the hospital, and I have a lot of serious allergies to some medications, and my bans were never flagged. And if I wasn't coherent enough, they could have very well given me a penicillin that would have caused serious harm. So, we have to have someone that's always available to review these records as we advocate
Mhm.
for our care as a caregiver for our loved ones because they cannot do that for themselves. So,
Yeah, exactly.
let me ask you, if you had taken your mom and that she were to get the care that you thought she needed, what would that look like?
I believe that first and foremost, it wouldn't. And let me back up for a moment. The reason why we went to the doctor, went to the hospital, was because our regular general practice surgery, which is also called a doctor's office here, is called a surgery. They kept telling me, bring in a stool sample. Did you give her some Imodium or Buscopan or anything for the gas? If I had done a stool sample, it would have taken a week for that to come back. That would not have been indicating diverticulitis. I digress. So if I were to bring her somewhere that actually thought about the fact this was a woman, with the health that she had, the recent blood work showing that there was a white blood cell count that was quite high, that alert alone would have probably flagged to any doctor that this was quite urgent. This could become sepsis. This could be something else. So I feel like if we went in and got seen right away and heard, then we could have nipped this in the bud probably 4 weeks before it actually got to the point where it did. But there isn't any preventative care, don't forget here. So if I had preventative care, I think we would never have had this exasperated infection in a very fragile part of an older woman's body where she cannot articulate the discomfort all the time. And I, being that I watch her on cameras, if I'm not physically next to her, would have noticed that I could have noticed that she wasn't comfortable, but I couldn't have pinpointed it without an evaluation. So if I brought her somewhere where they knew to look at this from a GI standpoint and not a general health standpoint, we probably would have been in a specialist's hands. And this probably wouldn't have been a neglectful situation where no medicine was provided, no cleaning of a woman who was clearly bacteria laden occurred. They didn't bathe her at one time. And the fact that she would have been treated faster, we probably wouldn't have had the steep decline. Because in Alzheimer's specifically, if there's an infection in the body, that infection will travel up that vulnerable spinal cord directly into the vulnerable brain and start to really, really create damage. It is just a known fact, and that's why you see UTIs throw Alzheimer's patients into a tailspin. It's no different. So this was just it could have been prevented situation, and now we have an aftermath that is months later.
And this is why we have systems that can run tests and give us diagnoses or give us clues to what's going on. But the bigger thing is that you as a caregiver have to be an investigator because they cannot
Yeah,
communicate to you with exactly what's going on. And so we need the medical system in itself to listen to what we have to say. And I think that's where one of the biggest fallbacks happens a lot of time is because they're so stuck in protocol that we have to do
yeah,
X, Y, and Z before we can do the next step. And this is
yeah.
when we need them to really step up and say, okay, you've been caring for this person X number of years. You know this person their whole life, and you know that there's something not right. Let's have a conversation. I think that's a critical piece that's missing in the health system today.
You know what I also think to add to that is that they need to listen to those that are closest to the patient directly. There's no reason for me to exaggerate anything. There's no reason for me to, you know, chase an antibiotic for an infected, intestinal tract or diverticula. They should listen. And I feel like if I didn't fight even today to get the metronidazole that I know helped her initially, they just kept giving me amoxicillin. She's allergic to penicillin. That's what they did the last time. They gave me some other Cipro, some other sulfur base. I was like, but they're so worried about drug resistance, antibiotic resistance here. This is not going to be the case with someone at 83 years old that hasn't barely taken an antibiotic in her life. So it's like listening to those who care or anyone that's disabled. Someone needs to speak for them because they cannot. And that person needs to be taken incredibly seriously, especially as a healthcare proxy in our power of attorney. I would only want that's why I'm here is to keep her alive and and to be heard. So I think that this happens in the medical cannabis world as well. Doctors don't want to be told what's wrong. They want to diagnose what's wrong. Or if they don't have the tools to diagnose, there's a lot of hypothesis like we have here because of the costs of the tests. So we can do better. This isn't nice. And her life is worth something even at 83 years old. And I think in our system here, it's very common that when there is a death sentence on the way, that the care level goes down. And that's a horrible thing to say out loud, but it's been evidenced by so many people I know in this
I, th-
country. I can't speak for all countries.
I think that's true in the US as well. I think there are some
Yeah.
people that care that you might run into, but as an overall, I think that's very true.
Yeah.
I think that we don't put enough emphasis on the care for the person as they age because they are seen as not having as much value anymore. And that might be true to someone, but I think they have so much value to offer. And she's your mom. And you, no
Yeah,
matter
she is
what's
my
going
mom.
on, you want her to be safe and protected. So
Exactly, and I want her to feel good. If these are the last years of her life, quality of life is everything. That's why medical cannabis is a part of our world here. For me, for her, for the dogs, for her, everybody's on it. And the reason why they're on it is because they deserve a good life. And if there's something irritating them that can be taken naturally, why not? They were worried about giving me diazepam when she was manic because that's what happens when you don't get your neuromeds. There's psychosis that sets in. I said, "Are you worried about my 83-year-old mother becoming an addict?" Because I'm not. I'm not worried about that, especially at 500 micrograms, which is a very low dose. And they were like, "Well," and I said, "But she's better on it and safer on it. There's a time for diazepam and there's a time where it could be abused." Spoken with several different psychiatrists. This is the time. So, I managed to get that for her just while we're mitigating what's happening. And now we have a medication review underway. But that was also because I pushed and pushed and pushed and demanded to speak to an Alzheimer's specialist so someone would know enough of what I'm saying and reciting is the behaviors, the problems, the physical ailments, and realize, okay, she knows what she's talking about. You have to prove you know what you're talking about, and not everyone does. So those types of people need to be heard too and then guided properly.
well, and I find it really interesting that you were saying they were very concerned that she would become addicted or, you know, take more than she's supposed to. You're her caregiver. You're giving her what she needs. You're the one that's guiding that. She's not guiding that. She's not making that
Yeah.
decision. Conversations, we have to be realistic about what we're talking about. Just
Yeah.
because we have a medical system that states if you use certain drugs, you'll become addicted, doesn't mean that just means we just automatically rule them out. It means that we need to see the bigger picture. We need to understand the
Yeah.
full story. So, thank you for
Mhm.
sharing that.
And it's the way our bodies change as we age, and with her, the brain shifts daily. I don't know what I'm gonna get when she wakes up. Angry, happy, I don't know. So if the receptors are changing. Don't worry about the addiction, in my opinion. I mean, I get that that's liability and they need to say it, but 500 micrograms once a day, I don't really feel like that's gonna be if it's keeping her safe and giving me a chance to work, which I have to do, otherwise it's, 2 a.m. nights just to get things done, then I'm not caring properly if I'm tired, we have to look at the whole picture. So I think you're right.
You built a whole team around you to work with your mom to help you through this. So
Yeah.
it's not just you having this insight and forefront conversation. There's a group of you that are
Mhm.
actually providing this
Yep.
information and this stability for your mom. And
Yeah.
who better to ask what works best? What should we do? What should we know? Who better to ask than you and the team that you have around you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we were all aligned but you don't wanna lose your team either when you see someone just failing so quickly, with her cognitive capabilities, fall risks, everything else. This it's hard. It's hard to keep good people. I'm lucky to have two that love her, but I'll probably need to expand that soon too, which is also scary because then you're factoring in another human into the situation when we've been cruising pretty well for a few years now. So, but it just everyone needs a break. Fatigue happens.
Absolutely. You have to take care of the caregivers first and foremost, or they're not going to be the best caregivers for their
Exactly.
loved ones or for anyone that
Exactly.
they care for. Because
Absolutely.
being a caregiver for someone with Alzheimer's or dementia is like one of the hardest things I've ever had to experience because they cannot tell you what they're feeling or what's going on. And like you
No.
said, every day they're different.
Every day they're different. Speaking of which, one moment, please. Hi.
Sure.
You. I'm good. I'm on a call. Can you go sit over there for me and I'll be right with you, okay? Go over there. Go over there. Go over there to your TV. I'll be right there, okay? You go over there. Go ahead. I'll see you in a minute. The woman at the hour.
Well, I think that's good. And
Asking
I
if
think
I'm
it's,
okay.
and that's nice to see as well that she's asking you if you're okay. So that's
Yeah,
nice.
yeah, exactly. Not a
So,
common question I get asked, so that's
yeah,
good. Showcasing something's working.
yeah. So, did you
Um,
feel like a visitor instead of an essential member of the healthcare team when you took your mom into the hospital and everything on?
absolutely. I felt like there's burnout there, there's understaffed exhaustion going on there. I was just another woman who cared about her parent that they've seen a million times, and they weren't really interested. I mean, I would look at some of them, I'm like, "How can you keep telling me that it's gonna be a few more hours when you're clearly seeing this woman is not doing well?" They're like, "This is what we've got to deal with." So I felt helpless, not just so much a visitor, but helpless. And it was when I took my power back after the exhaustion of being up and trying to harness a very agitated woman down for 13 hours by myself in a very plastic chair in the middle of a very crowded room. When I came back, that's when I walked in and I was like, "I'm business now. Like, I'm back. Don't this isn't gonna happen." And I went in strong. And they even suggested, "Would you like her to stay?" I said, "Where she wasn't given her meds or bathed? Not in your wildest dreams will I ever set foot through this door again. I will find a different solution." I'm like, I'm ashamed for all of you, and I'm ashamed for the staff that were looking after her that never even took a class on Alzheimer's disease or a course or anything in nursing school to apply towards whatever various people come through.
I find that interesting that you say that because I think that if you're working in a hospital environment, you need to have a little bit of a general understanding of everything because
Yeah.
if you don't, you're gonna miss something. And if you don't know, go ask somebody that does or ask somebody else to set in.
I remember paying a fortune as a self-employed person, privately paying for her own healthcare, and yet I still didn't get treated correctly. And I still got exorbitant bills for like a 45-minute ER visit for like, a bee sting, whatever it was, you know? So it was, I don't know where or how we can do better globally. I know, and this is my new home and has been for over a decade. This is my backyard, and I'm kind of horrified. I resist ever going to a hospital here. I was misdiagnosed for 8 years too with something that was pretty fatal, but it was because of who I am that I advocated for myself. So it's like you think about these types of efforts, they're exhausting. Life's stressful enough. We should be able to go to pillars of society and get solutions pretty quick.
It needs to be fixed, that's for sure, and I don't know what the answer is, like you said, but I think that we have to continue to point out these things that we're talking about today and where the flaws are, where the missteps are, where the education is lacking, and hopefully that we have something that we can offer better in the future because this is not working so well. I don't think anybody chooses to be sick. I don't think anybody chooses to have Alzheimer's. I don't think anybody wants to be a caregiver. It's just where we are, and if we didn't have that, I don't know where we would find most of these patients. I think that we have to have caregivers that are listened to and understood that they are the caregiver and they spend the majority of their time with this person. So, I
And
think
care
and
enough to bring them.
we need a system that you can take them to that will be responsive to your needs instead of a generalized system, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, it isn't socialized. It's a moneymaker for corporations. You know, the use of the healthcare system in America to me is it's economically focused, it's profit focused, it's not people focused. And there are caring people out there. Don't get me wrong. I know some amazing doctors and nurses that would go above and beyond. But when you're understaffed, underpaid, underfunded, we have to take care of those that have studied and gone through the education. And in the interim, if we're not getting that as caregivers, as ones that have to advocate for ourselves, the whole purpose of the medical cannabis industry, which I am passionately involved in for this reason alone, is that we need to advocate for ourselves with natural, non toxic, non intoxicating solutions when we need it. And that has THC and other cannabinoids that can support our systems in between the long waits, the misdiagnosis, and everything else. And that's how I survived tumors in my uterus. You know, I mitigated it with cannabis until I was pushing for a hysterectomy. And when I finally got it done during COVID, after 4 cancellations and being misdiagnosed all this time in pain, I mean, in such pain. And when they took it out, they're like, oh, yeah, that was malignant. That was the answer I got. Oh, yeah. I stopped it though. I mean, I stopped the proliferation to the point of not spreading, but did I know I was doing that? I don't know. But did I get relief from pain and was able to function and manage the difficulties I was having during those periods of time? Yeah, I mean, but that's why alternative medicine has to be our go to when we have to advocate for ourselves. We have to be able to have a household with resources and not just pharma because we could hurt ourselves with extensive Advil or ibuprofen or what is it, acetaminophen over, you know, or even paracetamol in excess. It's going to hurt your gut. So we have to find solutions.
Well, with what we know now and as much information as we have around cannabinoid therapies and the role that they can play in a multiple of conditions, we know that it is a good source to start with first and foremost. It's also a good additive to other pharmaceuticals that you're using. So we need our medical professionals to understand the role that that plays, and we can't
Yeah,
keep dig our head in the sand as medical professionals and say, "I don't need to learn about that," and it is happening, and we need to make sure that you're on board and understand what works for our body. Everybody's body is different. No one's the same, and we need to be treating us as individuals, not as a group of people in a box. We may have the same diagnosis, but what works for one does not always work for the other.
precisely. No, you hit the nail on the head. And that is it. I mean, when you have an ever-changing brain, for instance, one drug that seems to be working. I mean, look, the drugs that she was put on when she was diagnosed by this incredibly skeptic type neurologist I met with in Boston before I took her here. She goes, well, it doesn't normally work. I'm like, well, we're going to try it. because I'm going to try anything. So normal doesn't matter to me. Normally doesn't matter to me. This is something that has to occur.
I find it interesting because I cared for my mother-in-law and my mom both with Alzheimer's disease, and they both had very different symptoms. They both reacted very differently, and they were both using the
Hmm.
same medications. So
Hmm.
this is just another example, and we find this with cannabis as well. But we find that
Oh,
cannabis is a good supplement to help, at least with agitation, sleep, those kind of things. Can you explain a little bit about how you use cannabinoid therapies with your mom and what benefits
absolutely.
you do see, and then what you saw happen when she didn't have access to it at the hospital?
Absolutely. Well, we started off with oils. And this was when oils first kind of became available in the UK, but on a very, very infrequent basis were they in stock. So sometimes the oils I got, which were typically a 25-25 or 1-to-1, mm, they were they were okay. There were certain brands that worked better than others, but prior to using any type of THC, my mother had been on CBD, well, until I went to get her where I wasn't sure whether she was taking it every day. I'd always send her a supply. She had a constant subscription to deliver CBD to her door in Boston, which I do think helped during COVID, especially the isolation, being a recent widow as well, ease some of the anxiety that she was feeling not being in her active routine, which she had done for years and years. Now, today, I was giving her the oils in the morning where I would notice a significant increase in feeling like she needed to go somewhere because at the beginning stages of Alzheimer's, their whole life stops. Their whole life, their driving, their work, everything stops. And for someone that's active, that's really disarming. That's extremely anxiety driving. And so I utilize it there. Since then, it's changed. So sleep or sundowning, as they call it, when they are exhausted, which can happen at any time of day. It doesn't have to be sundown. Initially, it was sundown. It was 5 o'clock every night, a little funky, a little weird, a little bit anxious, walking around, not sure what's going on. Who's this? What's that? When am I going home? Despite living here. And then it started coming earlier and creeping earlier. So I've had to adjust it, but it does down the mania. It does take down the agitation. I can't always say it works dependent on how her body is receiving it. And that again is because the receptors are shifting in a very active, sick brain with what I believe vascular dementia is. There's constriction going on, which is affecting memory. I mean, we're talking seconds of memory is all that we got now, if at all. So when you have no recollection of what's going on, you could sit up and sit down and stand up and sit down about 90 times in 5 minutes because you're not sure if you just sat or if you just stood. So I was trying to mitigate those types of repetitive behaviors, which are very common in autistic people. There's certain repetitions that are comfortable, there's certain repetitions that are harmful. I mean, it's a disease where there are traits of so many different psychological diseases and mental health related illnesses. And all I did was adjust the medicine when I could, where I could. Now, putting it under her tongue still sometimes works, but I also utilize the oils in morning yogurt and evening chocolate pudding because that's where all the medicine goes in the evening. This is the only way to get it down. And crushed pills, add oil. I felt badly on her 83rd birthday this year. She was having an incredibly psychotic break, like a manic day. And that was again due to the fact she was just prior to that hospitalized. Um, and her cake did not have sprinkles on it. It had medicine sprinkled on it. And I was like, damn, this is the time where the sadness in my heart grew. And I thought, what other kinds of cannabinoid products am I going to be able to find on the medicinal formularies here in the UK? And I'm fortunate to say that there are suppositories being released soon. That, if she becomes not able to eat well or adverse, because their changes in taste happen constantly as well. It's a lovely, ever evolving space I live in. It's a big guessing game every morning. But if I have different products I can use, if I can, I mean, I used THC infused coconut oil on bruises that she received from falling in the night. That game changer. Can I get them on the formularies? No. Did I buy them from someone that makes them? Yes, because I had to, and I really hope to see like the formularies in their clinics because we are a medical environment here solely for medical use. Vaporizing flower, that's not going to happen with an 83-year-old. So I'm very fortunate I found oils when I did. I'm fortunate I can still get oils now. I'm fortunate her doctors believe me and listen to me in the medical cannabis clinics. And I'm glad that we have now localized and systemic options. So I continually use it at bedtime, though, because that helps her sleep, but doesn't give her that ataxic, propensity to fall that, say, a Valium would. So I try to replace pharmaceuticals with cannabis where I can, where I know it can help, but knowing that I'm dealing with a serious disease. And her doctors and her general practice, they all know I do this.
I think that's an important message that we should make sure gets out here. It's important the caregivers share with the medical professionals what you're utilizing and using. This is how we educate them. This is how we show
Mhm.
them what is working and what isn't working. But on the other side of that, we need our medical professionals to listen. We need them to take
Yeah,
note.
it's not just a nod, and even her Alzheimer's specialist nurse that we met for an assessment the other day, and mom displayed all her perfect behaviors. Just kidding, it was crazy. But prove my point. But that she said, "Oh, tell me more. Tell me more." And there's an awareness task force I'm a part of, specifically going to be speaking of this in October through the Cannabis Industry Council, where we're going to be asking prescribers to talk to non prescribers, prescribers to talk to patient groups outside of the cannabis space. This is how we're going to normalize the discussions. This is how we're going to take a society that's quite sophisticated now. They know CBD exists. Not everyone knows medical cannabis is allowed because kids can't. I mean, it's everywhere now. I mean, it's on Instagram. All the clinics are talking. But if you don't know, you don't know. And what looked like a heavy flower medical market, it was. But now it's slowly diverting to different forms of administration that could appeal to the demographics of my mother, of me as a carer. I use it every single night so I can switch off my brain, but not enough that I wouldn't be able to hear a fall or hear my cameras going off that she needed help. So, there's a fine balance, but it's a must. It's a must to find a solution that's natural and mitigating versus having pharma drugs keep her in a nursing home and letting her dribble in a wheelchair. That's not who she is, and I promised her I would never do that. Not unless I absolutely had to put her in a home, would she ever go.
Well, and we don't want our loved ones to be knocked out and not uh, with us at all. I think that's not a good place. We see that in hospice care as at the end of life a lot of times where they just use heavy drugs to keep them sedated, and they're not aware, and not that an Alzheimer's patient is always aware of what's going on, but it's nice to see that they're cognitive, at least in some form, and available in the world versus just laying there and not being anything. I think that's
Yeah.
really important.
I
I
think,
think
yeah, and the quality of life. That's what we're all about in our industry, and I'm pleased I can apply it. I'm pleased that I'm not just a talker of what we do every day. I live it, breathe it, sleep with it, eat it.
me
This
too.
is the world. This
Yes.
is the world, and you can't deny when you see how good it helps. Not everyone can take a medicine. There's drug resistance out there. We know this through the epilepsy communities. I mean, we know that. So the brain is a tricky one, but it's not one that is at risk for anything besides maybe a little bit of the munchies and a little bit of sleep. Who doesn't want that?
Well, and we
you
hope
know?
it gives them a way to smile, if nothing else, on top of that, and to maybe
Yeah,
find some kind of laughter somewhere, because this is the hardest part
gotta
about
find
this
it.
disease.
Yeah, you gotta find it, and let me tell you, I laugh a lot, when you see the silliness that goes on with Alzheimer's patients and the crazy decisions they make, putting bras on their heads and, hats on their feet, and you're like, "Okay, there's gotta be some humor in here somewhere," But when I've had cannabis and I'm dealing with my mother, I'm a much better carer because 'cause I'm patient. I mean, I'm always patient, but there are points where they can push you right out of that patient zone. When dealing with a patient, when dealing with anyone that's terminally ill, you gotta find humor, and let me tell you, cannabis brings that out, and like you said, there's a study going on at the University of Humboldt in, Berlin, and I was speaking with the, clinical researchers, and I have a meeting with them coming up because they talk about the facial muscles that are used when cannabis is taking effect and the relaxation. They're not talking about taking the cannabis itself, but the reactions to our face, what muscles we use to smile, to relax, and they're studying that. I'm like, "That's brilliant." because that needs to be understood by the doctors just as much as how to deliver the medication into a protocol and into a prescribing cascade.
That's awesome. I can't wait to see that study
Mm.
come out. That'll be great.
Yeah, I'm really excited too. They only
Yeah.
want women from Berlin, though. It's a little hard, but I'm gonna meet with the clinical researchers and see. We were speaking at the same event when I met them. But yeah, I mean, these are the things that are interesting, and this is why we all know who runs pharma, and we all know why pharma exists. Synthetic use of anything in excess is going to kill you anyway. So, yes, it's necessary. I'm not anti pharma, but I'm anti over pharma. No more over farming. Is that a word? Over pharmaceutically. I think we need to not overdo anything, and we have to look at complements and alternatives. And that's why I sit where I am today.
Well, this plant was put here for a reason, and I think that the reason
Pretty
is
much.
because we need it, and so we need to embrace what it can do, what it can't do, but we need to understand it, and we understand it by having these conversations. I think you said a really critical point there that gets often just missed, is that the caregiver can use cannabis as well during this process, because taking care of you through this process is just as important as taking care of your mom. And there
Yep.
is no relief from the caregiving that you do unless you have some help.
Every day feels like a week.
Yes, it does. And understanding that you don't know what you're gonna get every time you wake up in the morning, you have to start the day out like that, and you have to just be able to go with it and flow with it. Because if you fight it, you're not gonna have a very good day. So, allowing
No,
yourself to laugh, to go with the flow, to be understanding, because 'cause they're not aware of what they're doing. And that's the
no,
hardest
no.
part of this
That's
whole
a
disease to me,
yeah.
is that we do not know
Go.
what's going on. I would love to know what's going on inside of them, but we're never gonna know that as far as I know.
It's interesting to me. I mean, when you're at a state where you know they're going to die and you know their quality of life is diminishing on a hourly, if not daily basis, I mean, it's happening constantly. It's terrifying to see someone you love that raised you not be able to even, take a shower on their own or how to turn off the water. We had a little flood this week. So, like those moments, you're like, wow, she's a scientist. She was one of the first women to wear trousers to a university that was a teaching school because women were to wear skirts. She graduated from Northeastern University with a master's in science as the only woman in her class. Like, this is a woman who fought for the rights of science and for feminine values to be recognized. And here we are today where it's completely removed. And who am I to not, as her daughter specifically, I love her so much, but to not fight this corner and talk about these difficult discussions openly because I have nothing to hide. I think it's important that we just speak loudly and pass on what we know. Like you said, you go through trauma and you share it, you can help someone else going through the same thing. There's nothing different about this situation because this is a pretty prevalent disease.
Well, and I think you beautifully stated that what your mom contributed to society and the importance of it, and
Hmm.
we can't lose the acknowledgement of that when they develop this disease. We need to still
No,
honor them and give them the care that they deserve. They don't deserve second-rate care.
absolutely.
They deserve the best care, and we do that by providing education, by looking at facts, by creating research, and by listening. Again, listening is gonna be something that I refer to a lot here, because when we're talking about this disease, listening to what is happening and being observant to what is happening is really important. And we can't try to put everybody into one box and think they're all gonna respond the same. Just can't.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And no, I mean, there's not. That's the value of having a voice, and you know what people say to me a lot, which I find really sad and interesting at the same time? "Oh, you're such a good daughter. We don't hear a lot of people doing what you're doing." What? Keeping your loved one going through the most difficult time of their entire physical life on earth? Like, it is shocking to me, and my mother was loved by everybody. She wasn't a nasty person. So when you see any kind of anger come across her face, it's super sad because that's not who she is. But can we Can we fine tune it? My cheerleading outfit is on from the moment my foot hits the floor when I get out of bed. Because if I'm not actively smiling and acting like everything's okay, she'll worry. That's another exhaustive part of this. But do other people do that? Apparently not. I mean, I will do anything to make her days better because that makes my day better as a carer as well. So if you
I
want to go
find
head
it
to head with an Alzheimer's patient, you're not going to win. It's never going to happen.
and I find it interesting when someone says, "Oh, you're a good daughter." Well, why wouldn't I be? This woman
Yeah.
cared for me. She brought me into this world, took care of me, and I always related my example with my mother-in-law, my mother, a lot like having a newborn again and having to learn them, having to understand. The only difference is I couldn't put them in a playpen and they were gonna stay there. They
Yeah.
were constantly on the move, they were bigger. But it really is like
Mm,
learning a person all over again, and this is a person that you thought you knew and you did know, but that person doesn't exist right now. They're
yeah.
gone somewhere,
Yeah.
and now you have a new person. Doesn't mean you stop loving them, doesn't mean you stop trying to help them. It means that you just allow yourself to explore who they are now and go with what they have and what they're giving you. So, I think
Mhm.
that's beautiful that you have that
Yeah.
attitude, so and your mom is
Thank you.
lucky to have you. At
Yeah.
what point did
Yeah. The other
go ahead.
yeah, go on. No, it's okay. Go ahead.
At what point do we stop calling these isolated healthcare experiences and start admitting the system is failing at the very people it was designed to help?
I can say, having a father that also died from a brain tumor when I was 26, I saw failure then, and I don't think much has changed, and that was in 2000. So, when I look back of the yesteryear, of the times where I've seen malpractice occur and make a friend of mine, a very dear friend, when I was 14, she was 18, go into a vegetated state till she was 42, and she finally passed as a vegetable. Without any disrespect, that's what happened. I look at that incident and then I see, you don't really pay attention when you're a young person, but then you start hearing certain situations. I recently saw a woman go get her incredibly broken arm that her horse kicked surgically repaired wrong, and they had to redo it. And it's like, I think this has been going on my whole lifetime, and I'm 52 years old. And I think this has been going on my whole lifetime. So I don't see any form of improvement. I don't see a lot of preventative care being meant for prevention, but like in the States, I felt that preventative care was definitely prevalent, but who was banking on it? Who was making money on that prevention? Was it actually preventative care? Did it really help screen people? Are people getting diagnosed? Maybe so, because I feel like a lot of my knowledge on healthcare has been here just due to my own ailment. I'm like, what is wrong with my body? Because you don't see. And I was like, wow. So I was failed big time, because it was national health.
And were you
Sorry I
in
had
the
to
US or
experience
were
that.
you in UK then?
Here,
Yeah,
here. I went to a US emergency room and at a wedding, I was there for my family because I could have died from blood loss, and the doctors were like, "You have to get this out right away." It was 2 years later because
yeah.
the UK didn't recognize the CAT scan that was done in the emergency room in Florida.
I've been on the forefront of fighting for my health for a very long time and understand the battles that it is. But I actually started working in the healthcare system before it really became for profit and was involved in it long before it was for profit. And I think when it became for profit is when the healthcare system really changed and it wasn't about the patient anymore and their needs. It was more about how do we
It's a good
make the money? How do we put this out? We need
No,
doctors. We need them to be educated and qualified to meet our needs, but we also need them to know that we're a human person and that we deserve to be treated and respected and listened to. We're looking for them to partner with us in our health, not to just dictate to us.
no, and medical gaslighting happens, negligence. I mean, first of all, if we think about it, and let me tell you, I know some amazing doctors, caring, loving, amazing doctors, and 2 of the ones that are in the GP practice of my mother, their hands are like tied. They can only do so much. They have 5-minute appointments, 5 minutes, one ailment at a time. You know what I mean? But that's the law. That's the government running it. So for profit or socialized, I think both of those economics are screwy. They don't make sense. They don't work. Where's the happy medium? I don't know. So when you're saying when did we change, you're correct. I think when it went to profit over here, this has just been a system that's falling apart. And the hurrahs and the hoorays are not, during COVID, the NHS, everyone. What? Like, I don't see that. I saw people getting mistakenly diagnosed or not diagnosed or once sent home and died. I've seen broken arms with fractures compounding out of their skin, put in a sling and sent home until there was a surgeon around. That's not okay. And personally, I give NHS doctors mad credit as well as the nurses for showing up every day because they're showing up in a negligent system.
Yeah.
And that's gotta be hard because they're doing what they can. They're doing whatever they can to help us, but
Well,
it's not
they're
enough.
having to live within the same rules that we are, that they don't
Yeah.
necessarily always agree with, and they're still bound by those, so it makes it really difficult, and this is why we need to change the system. I've done a lot of studying about the system as a medical professional, then as a person that's seriously ill, and now as a medical cannabis specialist, and understanding how all this plays. And I think that there is a better system. I just don't know what it is. But I think it all starts with communication, understanding, and listening to the patient themselves and what they need. And let's allowing the caregivers and the patients to become their best guide in their health. And when we do
Exactly.
that, then we will be better providers for them, I think.
Mm.
So when families are forced to become researchers, advocates, coordinators, protectors, just to get proper care, who is really carrying the burden of healthcare?
It's a really good question. I mean, I think because I I work essentially, I look at it like 3 full-time jobs. My volunteer work, and my mom work, and those 3 jobs, all the burden comes onto me. If I weren't if I weren't focused or took my eye off of her or the ball or however you wanna put it, and still may show up, make sure I've got the Empower Her Cannabis Society running as best as I can, have my team behind that, active as best as they can, and have all my clients served with deadlines perfectly. The pressure is on me, it's on the carer, it's on every carer out there because most of the time, we don't have the luxury of just caring. We're working. Maybe we have young kids. Maybe we're trying to balance children and that. The burden of healthcare comes on to loved ones and those that actually care about the patient because the patient, which is probably feeling the stress no matter what, because it's energetic, but the patient's burden is we aim to not have them feel that. We take it all on board. So the receptionists probably take the burden when it comes to constantly calling and asking for a result. I feel bad for anyone that's on the front lines of, you know, a loved one that's really stressed over you know, the one they're caring for. Yeah, I think it's us. I don't know, what do you think? Is it the same
I think
way?
it's us too, and I think it's us that are gonna help change the system. I think that's why we work together to
Yeah.
try to help change that system. When cannabis came around and is available, I was hoping that the Cannabis Society would take a different step in helping to educate about
Mhm.
cannabis and make sure that our medical professionals and our colleges were incorporating this into the system. And with the US now going through Reschedule 3, which is we won't even go into the depths of that, but it's not really focused around the patient care. It's focused around products. And cannabis has the opportunity to do something really great and provide something that will make a change for decades and for generations to come. But if we don't set it up properly, we're missing an opportunity. And that's why you and I do the work that we do to try to bring and bridge that gap and bring the
Mhm.
voices together that can help do that. And it comes in collaboration. People can't do it alone. It takes all of us, and it takes all of us being supportive and listening to one another. So I think that it is us that need to be the ones pushing this forward and leaning on our politicians, our educators, and making them understand that they have an important role here. And it's not
Yeah.
just to make laws that sit to where they think they need to sit, they need to listen and they need to observe. And what I find is that until you need the help, you don't fully understand. But once you're in the throes of it, then it all begins to make sense. And
Yeah.
we need to change that.
You don't plan on this, you know? This wasn't in my plans, what I'm
No,
doing right now.
no,
I wouldn't wish upon anyone, to be honest with you, because it's heartbreaking on a daily basis. However, if we band and stand together, if we rise and take an industry that can change the cultural, historical, healthcare, societal norms, we can do that as a cannabis industry. We have that power as a nascent, emerging industry, emerging markets, actually listening to the playbook that we're slowly writing, that infusing the UK with high THC flower from Canada the moment we became legal because we did not have any regional supply, made us look like a legal drug dealing medical market because high THC isn't for everyone. If we reflect on that, we can see now 8 years later, oh, maybe we should get some CBD dominant and balanced strains out there. Maybe we should get different forms of administration, which is what I've been screaming since 2018. Because not everyone needs intoxication. We need functionality, we need productivity, we need lifestyle, we need everyday heroes to be able to utilize cannabis. We can change by learning from that. We can change from learning grow at home sounds great in Germany. Is anyone going into your house and looking to see if you have 3 or 5 plants? Probably not. Where's the enforcement there? Let's look at these wonky little sectors that have, like, created a little bit of propulsion towards the way we wanna go and fine tune it and use our voices together, like you've just said, to give examples, to tell stories. Storytelling is the best way, and this isn't Chinese whispers, this is firsthand experience. If you're in the industry and you haven't touched the plant, please don't talk to me. I don't have an interest in working with you because you need to understand what this plant does before I will work with someone that in any capacity. Because if you're in it for any other reason for profit, you're not in the right place. We don't make any money. Not at this stage. We're
no, we don't.
trying. We're trying, and you know what? The sophistication of the traceability, like the Cannabis group I work for, they're making it so the product is traceable. Therefore, we have insurance and insurance. We have assurance and insurance in every product. These types of technologies, this is what's going to make us better. We're going to be taken seriously when we have and hold governance in our core, that our ethics match, that corporate structures are full of inclusion, because there is no sustainability without voices from the front lines, from the ones behind the laptop 14, 16, 18 hours a day. If you're cruising through cannabis and not working as hard as all of us, I don't know if you're really aiming for really making a difference. Not to say you got to burn yourself out. There's balance. But we got to put our all in. And this is an industry where I see the people putting their all in, those who I want to surround myself with. 11 years deep in it, and I now know who I want to work with more than ever. You know, you gotta roll up your sleeves. You can't be afraid of getting dirty. You gotta tell your opinions. You gotta have a safe, ethical, and governed working space. And as women, as we know with Empower Her, we're 958 women, I think, today in 3 countries, 43 countries picked. The if we didn't have that, I wouldn't be here today. Those are the women that were behind me to exit a terribly abusive marriage, to take on a mother with Alzheimer's, to be able to tell me I keep going when things go sideways. If it weren't for our group, I wouldn't be standing here. And that's one example. And then I look at all my male allies and I look at the companies that have hired me that are so wonderful and behind me 1,000%. Understand if I have to quickly, like, excuse me one moment because I've got to redirect someone that could hurt herself. That level of understanding and comfort reduces absenteeism. It makes you feel good about yourself as someone that's working hard because you're heard. And there's no difference in that to healthcare. We need to be heard, and we will be the best patient carer that you could imagine. You know, just don't disregard us. Give us options. Give us ethics. Look at this as individualized healthcare. Everything's individual. All of us are different. One ailment does not fit all, and one medicine doesn't fit all. Cannabis isn't the answer for everything. Psychedelics, I think, could be very helpful in medicine. Hopefully, we'll get there eventually. But for now, you know, we keep up our fight for those that are going to come after us. I always
Well,
tell my stepkids, "You know what industry to go into. You grew up with
that
this." You know?
you said that beautifully, and I think that's why you and I are both here, because we feel this and know this. We're passionate about it, but we've experienced it ourselves. So that is the key, as you said, is that if you haven't experienced this, I don't know that you fully understand the power of this plant.
Right.
And understanding the power of this plant is really important. And so I thank you for what you do and for your message and for
Mhm.
bringing together the group that you have. The thing that I see that is still a big struggle is the acceptance of the education of this and the battles that we fight that constantly somebody trying to disprove what we know, what we're experiencing. And that's where we have to start looking at this a little differently and saying, let's be open and honest. Yes, cannabis is not right for everything, but let's look at it realistically. What can it do? What can it not do? And understand that what it does for one person, it may not do for another. But does that mean that one person that could benefit from it should be denied? No, it does not.
No,
So it's a plant. Let's just
it's a
start
plant.
there. And
Let me tell you, if they use this against OxyContin, let's just use that because when I left America, it was the grossest prevalence I've ever seen of a drug on the streets and people passing out behind cars in South Florida. That's all I have to say. But when you look at that, is that good for everybody? But is it prescribed to everybody? So what's the difference? It's not. It's not good at all. It's a highly addictive substance, and yet it's prescribed to everyone. Very few people can say they have cannabis addictions. I've heard that it happens. I've been using cannabis since I was 17 years old. I wouldn't consider myself an addict. Do I consider it life-saving? On a daily basis. For me, on a daily basis.
well, this conversation that you just brought up here touched very closely to me because I was at 240 milligrams a day of Oxycontin
Wow.
and prescribed.
I'm still here.
And then I was just left on my own when the opiate crisis began in the United States and said, "We don't know who will help you, just we can't help you." And so I was left sitting on the curb trying to figure out what I'm going to do. And if I hadn't have found medical cannabis 11 years, know for sure I would not be here.
Oh, Debbie, well, I'm so glad you are because your voice and what you do and your newsletter and your interviews, I mean, your storytelling and your reporting, and this is what it's all about. Accuracy is in the words of those who go through it. We as women should never be mistaken that our passion and our empathy and our understanding is not in a business mindset. It is because the business is to make this available to everyone as an option because we should have a choice. Until we do better in healthcare, we need to have a choice rather than going to the black market. Why watching moms here in the UK who can't get a script for their kids, which is the reason why we even have an industry, is because of Hannah Deacon and her son Alfie. Why are we not giving kids medicine now? Now these moms are on the street looking for weed for their kids, looking for oils that are being pressed at home. There are plenty of people that provide them. I know them. But is it the legal way? No. Why are we making them do illegal things? So we have to keep doing what we're doing until legality sits or even in the medical market. Regulate it. I'm happy to have it regulated. I really am. Because when you decriminalize is one thing, you see a definite drop in aggressive behavior in, Portugal, Lisbon is an example. Decriminalizes everything. I went out in Lisbon many nights just to see what it was all about. No one bothers anybody. But we have a load of alcohol in this country, and we have a load of alcoholic cannabis events, and sometimes it's in the wrong hands. Let me tell you, I see a lot of negative stuff then, a lot of bad behavior. So let's look at options for healthcare that mean something, that have been proven to help and keep talking about it. That's the only thing we can do, and then use our voices collectively to lobby.
I think that's where we got off track in the United States as we went from medical then to straight into recreational, and that just negated the medical part. We hadn't figured out the medical system yet and incorporated and understood it. And I don't have anything against adult use, don't get me wrong. I
Me
believe
neither,
it has a
yeah.
purpose because I believe everybody that uses cannabis is using it to deal with or cope with
Oh,
something.
yeah,
I don't think
absolutely. No doubt, no doubt. I'm not I am so far from against that. So
right.
far from against believing that it's bad. I am so for everyone to be able to use a plant. And however the system sits, whatever country you're in, you just have to find the groovy spot where you're safely using it and you have got clean product. There's nothing to say that we can't keep going in a great direction and giving people loads of education. And that's what the Cannabis Industry Council, that awareness task force I'm a part of, I'm proud to be a part of that. I was the one gabbing about this so much that when I moved into this small village that I live in right now and I had a big dog, they called me the wolf and weed lady because they're like, she's got a wolf and she works in weed. I was like, that's a great brand. I'm going to call us trained wolf
That
and
sounds like a great brand to me.
I know. I'm like, I was the wolf and weed lady to my 75-year-old neighbors for a very long time.
Yeah.
And now, then I started getting all the non-working moms at the country club coming up to me and being like, "Can you tell us a little bit about CBD and like, will it help me sleep? Will it fix my brain fog?" I'm like, it has a propensity to do whatever you think it could do, and then you just play with the dosage because it's not intoxicating. You can help yourself, And I've even hosted women's events at local pubs, just talking to them about it, bringing in doctors to share. It's organic, it's grassroots, it's holding hands.
The reason the newsletter is global is because it doesn't matter where you live, what your health conditions are. You want to feel better. You want to live the absolute best life possible today because today's what you have. And so the systems are being created everywhere around the globe differently. And I think we have to come together and unite and create a system that supports everyone with this plant and understanding how we can do that. And it all starts, I'll keep saying, with education and proper vetted education. Because if we don't have that, my biggest concern right now is if someone doesn't know anything about cannabis and they go do an internet search, what are they landing on? Where are they getting their information? Because there's tons of it out there. Some of it's good, some of it's not. And so
Mhm.
having good quality education is really important. And that's why I work with people like you and
Well,
part of
it's
your
an
group.
honor. It's an honor, and yeah, we need harmonization, might not be in our lifetime, but I'll be damned if this is the short bit we have on earth that we don't leave behind a legacy to help those behind us lift. Because this is a big lift, but we are banding and standing together. You don't have to be a crazy person to talk your truth, to speak your truth. Truth scares people. I have no problem. I have no problem utilizing cannabis for anything that I know it improves my life with. If I want to sit and giggle all night at something stupid because I'm serious about 23 hours a day, I'm going to do it. That's my balance. I don't get little holidays. I don't get breaks. I need them. I will make it sometime, I hope this year. That's what everyone tells me to do. But in the interim, I need a little relief, and I need to be able to switch off. I could work 24 hours a day because work is actually my passion. So I don't mind doing it all the time, but I do need to take a break every once in a while. And that's a great way to take a break because you're not looking at your laptop when your eyes are like fuzzy. So,
I think
no matter what
there's
glasses you have
right. I
on.
think there's some pretty good research out there showing us that laughter is a very good, healthy thing. And so when someone says, well, you're too silly or you laugh too much, I don't want to hear it because I think laughter is medicine and I think it heals us all. And when your mother hears you laugh, I think that's healing for her as well. So,
Massively. You smile, she smiles. That's why I'm a cheerleader from the moment my foot hits the carpet every
yeah.
morning. I'm just like, let's go have a shower. Let's scrub. No one wants to be smelly. I mean, I do whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. Dance around the shower, whatever I have to do to make that woman happy, I do. I do. So, I mean, I'm not going to let her fall, but I'm also going to give her a quality of life no matter what.
No, thank you for that. And I thank you for your mother for being that caregiver that you are because I know
Well,
if she could say that to you, she would say thank you.
well,
So,
she every once in a while does, and Debbie, thank you because you were the first person to reach out, says, "I know what you're going through," and that made me cry. So thank you.
it's a lonely road. I don't think people understand when they hear that your mom has Alzheimer's or your dad, whoever has it,
Yeah,
and that you're being their caregiver. I don't think they understand what that road looks like. They see you just for an instant. They don't see what the 24-hour day looks like. And like I said, it's a long day and
yeah,
it's different every day. So it's not like you can build a system and get accustomed to it and build into it. You have to adjust every single day
yeah.
and you have to do it with a smile on your face.
Absolutely.
Because if you
Absolutely.
don't, you're gonna burn yourself out, and then you're gonna get irritated, and you're not gonna be happy, and you're not gonna be the best caregiver. So
Yep.
it is a work in progress every single minute,
Yep.
and I commend any parent or any person that is doing this and taking care of someone, because there's a lot of seniors out there that one of their mates has developed this condition, and they're having to take care of them. So, there's so many people that are in the thralls of this right now, and with the
Yeah.
latest study that just came out on cannabis and the improvement that they're finding in brain function gives me hope that
Yeah.
maybe we're gonna have some more breakthroughs with understanding this if we
Yep.
can.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. No, this was great. I'm so glad I got to spend time with you. Thank you for chasing me around. I was the most punctual person on the planet. I think I still am for most part, but it's usually these bewitching hours now and it's 8 PM that it's never it's never that easy to have calls at night, but tonight seemed to go fairly well with only one interruption, so winning.
Yeah. You don't ever have
Winning.
to apologize to me because I fully understand where you are. So is there
So it's
anything I
okay.
didn't ask you that you think we should leave off with tonight?
I mean, I'm available to talk to people who are dealing with the same thing. So if you wanna reach out to me, you can reach out to me. I'm totally fine because if I help you, you're gonna help them, whoever it is that you're working with, caring for. So, yeah, just feel free to reach out. I'm always available to talk, you know? I mean, it sounds like I'm the busiest person on the planet. I am, but I do have time for people because people stopped to talk to me when I needed them
Well, I know how important it is to be able to say to someone, "I understand, and you can call me anytime." So,
versus saying it's gonna get worse. That's what a lot of people say to me. I'm like, "Thanks." Or, "How do you do it?" I'm like, "Don't ask me those questions. That's terrifying. I have no idea. I'm just doing it."
you just have to
It
keep
shifts.
remembering that every day is a challenge.
Hey, we pivot in this industry. We can pivot with anything, right?
Exactly. So, all right. So thank you very much for
Thank you so
joining
much
me
for
and sharing
having me.
this. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, Debbie. Thank you. Thanks
Thank
for all
you.
your work, and we'll catch up soon.
Okay, thank you. As we close this conversation, I think one thing has become very clear. Caregivers are caring for far more than anyone realizes. They don't just help with appointments or medications, they are becoming researchers, advocates, coordinators, protectors, and often the only voice standing between their loved one and a system no longer feels personal. And for so many people listening, this conversation probably felt painfully familiar. Maybe you have sat in a hospital room feeling invisible. Maybe you have watched someone you love decline after routines and therapies that were helping got disrupted. Maybe you have felt exhausted for trying to convince people that quality of life matters just as much as managing symptoms. This is a great reminder. Caregivers matter. Lived experience matters. Listening matters. The patient is more than a chart, more than a diagnosis, and more than a protocol. Healthcare was never supposed to feel like a battle families fight alone. And while we may not solve these problems overnight, conversations like this matter because they give people permission to speak up, ask questions, challenge outdated thinking, and advocate for better care, better collaboration, and better quality of life. To every caregiver listening, your voice matters more than you know. To every patient struggling to be heard, you deserve compassionate and individualized care. And to everyone supporting someone they love through illness, decline, or chronic conditions, you are not alone in this journey. Thank you for joining us for another effective cannabis conversation. Keep asking questions, keep learning, keep advocating, and keep having the conversations that healthcare desperately needs. We so appreciate you dropping in. Your time and support are invaluable as we strive to educate and advocate for the transformative potential of medical cannabis. Remember, you have only one health and one life, and no one lives them but you. Let's continue this journey together. Subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay updated on our latest conversations. Your comments and engagement fuel the dialogue we need to create change. Until next time, stay empowered and keep exploring the wonders of your endocannabinoid system.